Really excited this evening to be hosting this Celebrating Women in Tech, a conversation with Gillian Arnold. So really great opportunity here to find out a bit more about Gillian's career in tech and to ask questions and hopefully find out and inspire more women into the industry, which is really important. So in terms of introduction, I'm Izzy. So I'm going to be your host for this evening's webinar. So I am Head of Employer Partnerships at the Learning People Group, which means that I work with a range of different employers looking to diversify their workforces. I did an apprenticeship straight from school, so I know what it's like in terms of looking for an opportunity and wanting to go and pursue that. And I'm really passionate about diversifying that and also getting more women into male-dominated industries. So this conversation today is super important. I'm really happy that we have Gillian Arnold with us to answer some really key questions about the industry, because the gender gap still does exist with women in tech. Currently only 26% of people in tech are women. So there's still that real need to diversify, and it's great to have so many of you on today to be inspired and hopefully to motivate you into doing this as an opportunity. So lots of organizations like Microsoft, IBM are publishing their reports and the work that they're doing in this space. And there's real benefits to having diverse networks in tech through innovation, through leadership, through performance. So it's going to be really interesting to hear about Gillian's experience of that today. So in terms of housekeeping for questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box and we will get to those at the end. So I am going to be asking Gillian questions throughout today's session. So some of your questions might be answered throughout, but then we'll get to the questions at the end as well to make sure that you all have a chance to ask and to find out more, because this is all about you finding out more to inspire more of you if you're not already to pursue a career in this industry. So in terms of introduction, I'm going to hand over to Gillian to do an introduction to who she is. Tell us a bit about yourself, Gillian, and then we'll crack on with some questions after that.
Thank you. I've been in the tech industry for eons, absolutely eons. I started when I was 17, started in a shipping company. I then moved to Citibank, spent some time at Citibank, and then I went contracting, and then I went to work for IBM. I spent 22 years working in IBM, did lots of different roles inside IBM. And then when I hit 50, I started my own company and we built software. We did some recruitment for women in tech, and we did some training. And these days I have a few non-executive roles in tech. I've just finished being the president at the British Computer Society, the Chartered Institute for IT. And yeah, I'm looking for more jobs as a non-executive director, so I'm not finished.
Exciting. And Rachel, can you tell us a bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, good evening to everybody. My name's Rachel Kay and I'm Director of Education at Learning People. And my background is sort of 35 years in education, and spent 20 years of that looking at skills and capability development in the defence sector. So I worked for a very large French defence contractor where 75% of the workforce were male. So always dominated in very male industries, of which about 60% of the workforce were engineers. So always worked in that sort of tech world, very much focused on helping organizations make sure that they've got the right level of skills as, you know, industry changed and as technology changed. I remember an early part of my career looking at how we could convert lots of hardware engineers into software engineers as software engineering became more in vogue. That was an interesting challenge. And at Learning People, I look after our student care team, career services, and I'm also responsible for the strategy around our curriculum. So yeah, really excited to be here. And Gillian and I have worked together for a number of years, because I was also a non-exec with Gillian at the BCS. So that's how, and thank you to Gillian, because we really appreciate her support on this tonight. She's got some great stories to tell, and I'm sure that'll inspire our existing students and potentially new students around a career in IT. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. And yeah, as you said, we're really grateful to have Gillian here. It's such an important topic to inspire more women into tech. So yeah, thank you, Gillian, for your time. And I guess let's kick off from the start. So you mentioned there your first career in tech when you were 17. Yeah, what kind of inspired you to pursue that? Let's start from the beginning.
I didn't care. I didn't want to be in tech at all. I had no clue. I was following the Sex Pistols. I came down to London and I went for lots of interviews for secretary and admin, and I wasn't getting the jobs, and some of them I didn't want. There was quite a lot of sexist behavior in the late 70s. And and then one guy said, you know what, you don't need this job. This is just, you're beyond this. Go off and go to such an agency, and they are recruiting for IT operators. And so I went, and the agency were lovely, and I thought I was going to get a white coat. So they gave me the job. It was working night shift, so it was incredibly exciting. And yeah, I was really annoyed that I didn't get the white coat, but I was dead chuffed that on night shift I could wear all my punk gear until I got to about 22, and then they went, actually, you need to take this a bit serious. So yeah, that was, so I don't think I ever wanted to be in tech. However, my dad was an electronics engineer, so I kind of wasn't scared of it. And that helped me to move into something that I might have been scared of, and it turned out it wasn't scary at all anyway. But, you know,
Yeah.
but people think, oh, tech, that must be really difficult. Do you know, I failed my A levels. I still did it, and had a wonderful time doing it. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And can you tell us a bit more about that first role? And you've mentioned there that your dad was kind of in the maybe industry, but how, yeah, tell us a bit about that first role. Like, what was it like going into that initially?
So I was working on shift with 15 people, or there were 15 of us, and I was the only woman. And
Wow.
for a while, that was really quite difficult. And then another woman came on board, and she was kind of more senior. I was just the junior, and she was brilliant, and she supported me. And you know, th those people are really, really special. And
Hmm.
also, some of the men that I worked with were really special too, very supportive, helping you to learn the things that you needed to learn. But
Hmm.
yeah, we were rebels as well. We got up to all sorts of high jinks on the night shifts. So if you really want to have fun at work, then I think tech is the place to do it.
Yeah. So would you say that that first woman that you met was a role model in that sense of showing you that it could be done? Like, yeah, what effect did she have on you?
Yeah, she absolutely did. So she was called Naz, and she looked after her two sisters who their parents had died. So Naz was looking after her two sisters, and then she was coming into work doing the night shifts, and she was really skilled. She knew what she was doing. And
Hmm.
that was the first role model, the first person who
Hmm.
I could say, oh wow, I can be this, I can do this.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just mentioned kind of Naz's challenges there. What challenges did you face coming into this as a career, and yeah, how have you overcome them?
Uh, Quite a bit of sexism through the 70s and 80s. If you think Me Too is all there is, the 70s and 80s were somewhat horrendous.
Hmm.
So I remember I've been sent off to a computer users group, and there were about 200 people, and I was the only woman there. And it was a 2-day conference thing. There was an overnight stay, and on the night, there was going to be a gala dinner. So they said to me, "You're the only woman, you can come and sit at the head table." So I did that, and I was, I was kind of participating in the conversation, and I thought that I was doing okay. And then they served dessert and the stripper came on. So this was the 1980s, and it was very different to
Mm.
the way we conduct ourselves now. However, you should always just be aware that there might be something that comes and bats you from left.
Izzy, I wonder if I can just come in there. Gillian,
Yeah.
did that ever put you off being in an environment where you were, one of the only females? Because even though we've made progress now and we do see more women in tech, you probably still always be in the minority. I mean, do you remember feeling, did you feel like the only woman in the room, I suppose, is the
Yeah, oh
question.
yeah, absolutely. I knew I was the only, but part of me was furious, just like, well, why is this happening? And this is not going to happen. And Rachel, that well, throughout my career, I've been working on women in tech, trying to
Yeah.
raise the
Yeah.
numbers of women. And I think it's created that. It's created
Mhm.
this sense of injustice. And so I've wanted to work on it. So yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, the stripper, I just said, right, I'm out of here, and I walked off. And so I knew in my heart of hearts I was probably being rude to them by leaving the table, but I wasn't standing for it.
Fine.
Yeah. And I was really quite young, but yeah, maybe it was that punk thing. Maybe I was just an icon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've mentioned there like that was a scenario where you had to advocate for yourself. Have there been any other scenarios where you've had to advocate yourself in a male-dominated environment, and how did you overcome them?
I think there are lots of times where you have to advocate for yourself, and sometimes it's in a sometimes it's just not male dominated at all.
Yeah,
It's just the way things are. And so I found assertiveness techniques really useful. I found
yeah.
that thing about not getting aggressive, but just repeating yourself. That's really useful. And I had this I had this team in Europe. So for years, I'd been using all these assertiveness techniques. And then IBM said, "Oh, we want you to build a new team all across Europe." I'm like, "Oh, great. I'll start recruiting." And I did. And and then I got to a meeting in Amsterdam, and I wasn't being heard. And I was kind of quite senior by this time. And so in the meeting, I would have expected to have had a space to speak and to be
Mhm.
heard. And I wasn't being heard at all. So I started banging the desk, which is what I'd used to do in the 80s, like just rap the desk and make a noise and be out there. And but I was really surprised that Amsterdam or Holland or whatever were further behind than we were, and that
Mm.
women had managed to claim their place at the table to a greater extent in the UK than they were in Europe when I got this European team. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah.
you just have to believe in yourself. Sometimes that's really hard to do,
Hmm.
kind of go into the job and you maybe don't feel that you belong. I mean, I certainly, with my failed A levels, I didn't feel that I always belonged.
Hmm.
But you have to have this certain bolshiness, this belief in yourself. And one of the ways that so at the moment I'm doing some research with the Open University and with Aberystwyth University with two really close friends who wrote the last book with me. And so the research is on something called micro behaviors. This is the subtle little digs that get to you. It's
Hmm.
the time when somebody avoids your gaze, when they've asked a question, but they're avoiding looking at you, which means they don't want an answer from you. And that kind of hurts just a little bit. Or, maybe they've not answered your emails 3 or 4 times, and that hurts just a little bit. And you have to kind of go back and go, "You didn't answer my email." And so you feel humbled and they kind of get the ascendancy. And these things are called micro behaviors, microaggressions, micro inequities. And we're doing research about that. If you can spot them, then you know that there's an inequality happening. And then whether you kind of accept that it's happened and you move on, or whether you turn around and go, do you know that you just ignored me? Or do you know that you've been reading your phone all the time that I've been giving you the answer that you just asked me for?
Yeah.
Um, and so you can either challenge them or you can overlook them. But as soon as you know they're there, then you know that people are trying to undermine you. And that means that you can believe in yourself a bit more.
Mhm.
That's my take on it. Do you,
Yeah.
do you too experience them?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially from my last role and also being young as well, it just adds something else in because you haven't maybe got that experience and you've been in that environment. But I know I understand what you're meaning about like the self-doubt side of it, but I think when you do get heard and then your opinion is listened to, you're then like, oh, I knew I was right. It's just getting
Yeah.
that confidence to say it and having the confidence is the key thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, just in my experience of being in, in that defense sector for a number of years, I used to find that it wasn't so much from a behavioral point of view about communicating in meetings, but and this was sometimes me being probably a non-techie in a very techie environment, that there was this, what I used to refer to as academic jousting. So you were in a meeting and it was like, yes, but I used to do a lot of work with the Royal Navy, so lots of sort of very military, people with great military backgrounds that clearly had knowledge that I didn't have. And there was sometimes a testing of knowledge. And Gillian, I don't know whether in your career when you got that, when it didn't matter, and perhaps it never did, that you weren't the technical expert in the room because your leadership and what you were then doing around leading functions and teams actually outweighed the fact that you might not have been the most tech person in the room, but actually you had a team of people that were the experts below you. Was there ever that? Do you ever remember thinking, yeah, I am in a meeting now. Did you ever feel that slight imposter syndrome? And perhaps I don't have all this tech knowledge, but I'm actually leading the project. So that's for me to go away. And do you see where I'm coming from? I don't know if that
Yeah.
was a thing.
Yeah, no, that was a real thing. I had inside IBM at one point, I had a team of about 30 architects, and they were the top hardware architects for IBM in the UK for all the kit that we would roll out to customers. These people, and interestingly, there were two women out of the 30. But they were the absolute creme de la creme. I couldn't hope to be as technical as they, but I was their leader, which meant that I had to understand the fundamentals of what they were doing so that I could then deploy them if necessary. But also I think it's nice when your managers respect you enough to ask you what's the next step then? Because
Mhm.
and I think as a manager, it's really important to believe in yourself enough not to have to worry that you don't have all that technical detail.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
important.
And ultimately you're in the position that you're in for a reason, right? And I think that's another thing to remember is you've been put there, you've been given this opportunity and you can do it. And
Yeah.
that's another part of the belief process that people need to remind themselves of
You know,
sometimes, no matter how
that really applies when you're right at the start, because if you've been given a job, if somebody has read your CV, interviewed you, and asked you in, then
Mhm.
actually they've given you that piece of confidence. They've said, we think you can do it. And so you
Exactly.
have to allow that to carry you along for at least the first 3 to 6 months.
Mhm.
They believed in me enough to employ me and take me on. Let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken there, Gillian, around the challenges that you've potentially faced and that you have faced over the last, over your career. But what's obviously you're kind of inspiring people now, you've continued to inspire women into tech. What's something that you're really proud of from your career?
There are loads. There are loads. I built a new product team. I loved that. somebody said, we've got a new product coming out of IBM America, and we'd like you to be the first technical team, you to lead the first technical team into Europe with this new product. And so we were feeling our way in the dark. I went and hired these people. We kind of crept round, met customers, not in any not in any dodgy sense, not, but we were just like feeling how this product would hit the market. And that was so exciting. It was so exciting. And it was brilliant because the team were so like they couldn't tell jokes because the Germans didn't get what the Swiss person was saying and the Portuguese was offended, and it was really interesting.
When you build, sorry, Izzy, when you build a team, Gillian, when you gave that example, and when you what do you really look for to get that diversity? And I don't just mean from a gender point of view, but our students on the call, some of them would have perhaps had IT backgrounds and looking to upskill themselves. Some of them perhaps will be coming new into the IT sector, but are fully qualified and they've got all their qualifications and they just need a break. So as a hiring manager in that example of, building that team for the new product, if I wanted to get on your team, what would you have looked for in me? What would be the things that would have been really key for you?
So I want a mixed team because if I've got all top skill, then they're going to move on. They're so skilled that I only get access to them for a short period because
Okay.
somebody else will scoop them
Yeah.
up. So what I need is a mixed team in terms of skill, the highest skill and the moderate skill, and then maybe the juniors. If I've got the opportunity, then I'll bring in people right at the bottom. And I don't mean by age, just by skill type. And then what else do I need? I need people who can deal with customers, but I also need people who can deal with data. And sometimes those are not the same skill sets. So the customer people are going to be much more communicative. They're perhaps going to be much more innovative, whereas the data people may not be, they might be, but they're more likely to be driven by a different set of
Makes
motivators.
sense. Yeah, makes
So,
sense.
and when you think across the IT industry, the hundreds of different job types, then there's room for all of us with all of our skills. And you mentioned, people kind of coming in. There are so many wonderful skills that we could use within the IT industry that we don't have, but people who are coming from another discipline can bring those skills in. And I often think of women who come in after having children because they'll say to me, "Oh, well, I've been at home and I'm like, you've been at home and you've been juggling kids and you've been working out agendas and you've been deciding when things are going to happen and you're going to be holding all these balls up in the air for managing the home, managing and trying to get a bit of time for yourself at the same time. All of that is a set of skills that we just don't talk about, but we've got all of that.
Transferable skills. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if you're coming in from elsewhere, the tech industry needs you. And one of the things that's happening with the tech industry is because it's starting to be embedded in every other industry, then we need skills from every other industry. We don't understand necessarily how lawyers work best or what would work for lawyers best. But in order to build an app for a lawyer, we need to understand that stuff. So as you come in with different skills, you're bringing that to the industry. And so never feel that you're an outsider because actually you're bringing something incredible in. Oh, and maybe I'll tell my outsider story. So I get to IBM and they said to me, I went to the interview, they said, "Oh, that's the worst test that anyone's ever filled in for IBM. But we're going to take you on and we're going to give you a chance because you were so enthusiastic about the job. And you can't wear trousers because you're a woman, all that." And then after about 3 weeks, I thought I don't fit here. I so don't fit because all the men that I'm working with are they're Oxford or Cambridge and they're all so brainy and I don't fit. And but they asked me to. I was learning to teach, and they said, "Can you go and view this course because we want you to teach it?" And so I went to view it, and I came away, and I said, "Why don't you teach generation data groups?" And they said, "Oh, well, nobody uses that." And I said, "No, they do. The whole industry uses that. They all use it. It's the only way." It was something from the mainframe era. It's the only way we can cycle things. And we can tell it's a Wednesday or we can tell it's the end of the retail year by means of this thing. Why don't you teach it? And they said, "Oh, well, we didn't think anyone used it. And anyway, we don't actually understand it." And I realized I was kind of leaping inside and going, I understand it. I know how this works. It was a kind of fairly difficult conceptual thing, but I knew how it worked. And therefore, I knew that I had practical skill and they had academic skill. And so,
Okay.
when you come from
Yeah.
outside, you're bringing something else. So never
Mhm.
feel that you don't belong.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the enthusiasm comment is really key as well, because I've
Mm.
had similar experiences in the past, even with my role currently. I perhaps didn't have the expertise for it at the time, but I had the passion for it. And I think that's what comes across in applications and when you're applying for roles and interviews as well. So no, I totally agree with that. And is there anything, Gillian, that you wished you'd known when you'd started out? Obviously, it wasn't an industry that perhaps you were wanting to get into, kind of fell into it and then have done amazingly since. So is there, yeah, something that you wish you'd known from the start?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you know, one of the things that IBM taught me is it's all right to say I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if there's
absolutely.
anything that I wished I'd known. Maybe something will come to me later. I
And it
suppose
was also
I
so
just
new.
maybe, I wished I'd known that it was that simple, that possible, and that I could do it. And
Yeah.
so I spent an awful lot of time fretting about that. But
Mm,
For my, I probably can understand where Gillian's coming from as well as thinking about that. But I think for me, being sat in very tech meetings, sometimes as a non-tech, I mean, I sort of, got where they were going to from a sort of concept point of view, but sometimes when they would talk about tech, I think that thing of never being afraid, and this applies to our students who are going into new. And in fact, someone's just put something in the chat around, perhaps having imposter syndrome sometimes if you're not familiar with all the sort of tech applications and stuff. Um, there really is no such thing, I don't think, as anybody being sat in a meeting and thinking that was a really silly question that someone's asked. So I think one of the things that's really important is don't ever sit there thinking, I think I know what that means, but I'm not sure. I think
mhm,
testing it with showing question, asking questions for me is a sign of great intelligence. I tell my
yeah.
kids this all the time. A curious mind and a great question, you'll go far. Yeah, people don't mind it. Yeah, I mean, look, clearly there's, you want to make sure that you're thinking about how you come across, but a good, curious, intelligent question. I think in my early career, I just wish sometimes that I had a bit more confidence sometimes to have asked them because I always had them in my head and perhaps somebody else asked it by the end of the meeting. But for me, especially in a techie environment, what's common to one is least common to another. So technical terms, never be afraid. And again, going back to Gillian, if she was in building that team and someone was sat there and you would rather your team member asked, I assume, Gillian,
no,
and
absolutely.
sorry, can you just run that past me, Gillian? I'm not sure. You'd rather ask that, wouldn't you, than
Then
go
things
off
go
and
wrong.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But often when you're asking that question, everybody wants to ask that
yeah,
same question,
yeah.
but they daren't. So then you're the brave one just by asking the question.
Yeah.
And somebody's kind of going, oh, they'll go far. So it does, as long as it's, like you say, an intelligent question.
Of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think asking questions shows that one, you're interested, and two, you're listening. And
Mm.
those are also
Mm.
skills that perhaps people need to share in meetings or in environments, because without, the worst thing you could do is leave a meeting and not have a single clue what's just happened and then get asked about it later down the line. It's all about that intelligence and, like you said, understanding what's happening at that time. So we've spoken there about some of the challenges and proudest moments, Gillian. What do you think is preventing more women from getting into the industry? You know, how can we inspire more?
So one of the things that I really regret has not happened. So we are making progress. We really are, Izzy. I
Yeah.
mean, we for 2000 through to 2020, we were at 17% women in tech. It didn't move. However, we were all in the grassroots groups, kind of working on it. So I wonder how it would have been if we hadn't worked on it. But now we're seeing an uptick in the numbers of women coming in. Yeah, I'm sorry. I repeat your question.
What are the biggest challenges preventing people from women from coming in?
So the thing that I regret has not happened is there was a research paper out of Bristol or Exeter universities many years ago that said there are no women role models on the TV. They're not in the films. You know, when we look at the role models for women in tech, they're not really there. There's lots of role models of men in tech, and we don't want to be that.
Yeah.
But there are no women. And then you see the odd one, and then there was Doctor who could have been said to be, you know, Jodie Foster could have been said to be a techie type woman, but
Mm.
but really that hasn't changed. I haven't.
Yeah.
And so, if there's anyone who's a crossover from the media, from Channel 4, then there's your opportunity, there's your passion to find ways to use technology to make women role models more prominent in the.
Mhm. Yeah. And role models is key. What other things do you think that organizations could be doing to make it more inclusive?
Oh, I every time get at the middle management. So
Okay.
organizations should start with the executives. The executives should understand that if anything is going to change in their business, then it has to be through their sponsorship and then the middle management who are trained to make a difference. And so in tech, that's going to be the IT director and anyone working for them. Um,
Yeah.
and they need to understand that every hiring decision is an opportunity to make change.
Mhm. Absolutely. And what advice would you give for someone who is either studying towards, you know, a tech pathway now or is interested in doing one? What advice would you give to them?
Maybe not advice, just this is such an exciting career. How can
Yeah.
you not? Just be tenacious. And
Hmm.
we were talking earlier before we started about how many applications you have to make for a job. Even as a non-executive director, I've probably done, oh, I don't know, 8 or 9. And I was talking to somebody last night and I went, oh, I've done 8 or 9 and nothing's happened. And the person said, well, when you get to 20, then we'll start and talk again. Because,
Yeah.
you know, we think that we can just step into roles, but we can't. Everybody's trying to step into a role and we're competing with them.
Hmm.
So, you know, at every stage, you've got to be tenacious about making your applications. And also, to your point about the enthusiasm, Izzy, find something that drives your passion.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I was saying to this person last night, well, I'm doing the research and that's kind of interesting and I'm doing this thing and that's kind of interesting, but actually none of it's floating my boat. And she's like,
Yeah.
therefore, you know, your applications are not going to work because you're not enthusiastic about it. She's
Yeah.
wise. She's a very wise friend.
Yeah. And it comes through in the process, you know, like when you're at the interview, like just the energy that is brought to the room. I think it has to be something that you're passionate about, and also that you really want.
Mm.
And that's so, so important. And what would you say about people who have they don't have a traditional tech background? So perhaps they don't think they have transferable skills. I'm sure they absolutely do because they can come from any industry, but they're a complete newbie to the sector.
Well, I wish I was back there again. That's what I'd say. I mean, you know, once upon a time, they took people into tech who had O levels. They took me in with O levels or, you know, kind of GCSEs. So if you've got GCSEs, you can do it. And, you know, you can walk this. So if you've got your English and your maths, you will be able to do it. There are so many different roles. If you don't find the right role for you, then look for another one. You may not want to be a programmer. It's quite a solitary, you know, kind of very being in the zone type of job. But you might want to go and be a marketeer who markets technology, which still means you have to understand how it works and what the benefits are. And so, you know, there are so many different jobs. Oh, and if you're a woman, don't do the housekeeping, don't do the admin, don't do the minutes, or at least if there are going to be minutes done, make sure that you are the one who is doing it on a rota, not being asked to do it all the time. And, you know,
Or use a lot of the latest tech now as well, where we get nice sort of AI
oh yeah,
tools that do the minutes for us.
yeah,
So, but yeah,
exactly.
no,
Use
I
that.
know I know exactly where you're coming from, because I fell into that trap quite early on in my career as a woman. Is, oh, I can do that organizing bit, and
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's about everybody doing it. It's not about one doing it and the other not. But yeah, I think now hopefully you know, having those AI tools in our meetings means that
absolutely.
but
Yeah,
actually, you know, the review of those meetings at the next meeting, who's going to take that task, becomes the thing. Gillian, I
yeah.
just wondered, sorry, if you don't mind, just thinking about what Gillian was saying there about, you know, you mentioned about programming there, and, you know, the type of, you know, typical person that might suit that. I mean, if you think about it now, there's so many options in tech. You mentioned there, whether it's tech marketing, whether it's programming, you could go into cyber, you can go into data, you could go into networking, cloud. In your experience of these hiring organization, what you know, are any of those having a surgence of more jobs in this area from what you know, or is it all about cyber still? I mean, cyber was
Yeah,
a great thing sort of 10 years
cyber's
ago.
big.
AI now. I mean, what's your thinking when you talk to, you know, customers and thinking about your BCS role where you're trying to support industry? What were you seeing, any themes over the last year or so?
It's the same. It's AI, it's data, it's cyber, you know,
Okay.
it's those things.
Yeah.
However, underpinning all of that is, you know, the understanding of the holistic technology. You can't, so you need to start somewhere with it. And so yeah, it underpins all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing that data roles, business analysis roles
Yeah.
are, you know, really, really lots of
Business
jobs.
analysis.
Cyber's always going to be there. You know, we're never going to, the biggest risk that we have, you know, from a defense point of view is a cyber attack as well as physical attacks. So, you know, we're certainly seeing that all of those roles, and networking and cloud and the efficiencies that that's brought to large tech
Do you know,
environments
I
are really
think
exciting.
the other thing is people don't quite understand the role of the architect. And
Yes.
actually, if I was going to aspire to something and so if you think about it, you're going to go into tech and you'll either be a kind of techie leader, and therefore you'll need more leadership skills and a tech overview, or you'll be a techie. And so there'll be two kind of tracks that you could go on. And for the tech person, the one who is like fundamentally wants to stay tech throughout their career, then becoming an architect is probably the top of the tree, you know. And that means I understand everything. I see it holistically. I know for me, that's got to be the most exciting role to aspire to, because good grief, it means you can connect everything. You can connect the software. You can make it talk to the data. You know how it will be connected, and you know how to protect it. And it's such an all-encompassing role that it has to be the top of the tree. And they're having to split it because there's so much to know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
A
So
couple of the most read blogs on our website is talking about data science with the Beyonce ticketing fiasco that happened a little while ago, and also how data science is used in Formula One. So again, you know, if you've got a passion about something, do you know what? You'll probably find a data role in it, because whether it's in fast consumer goods, of retail, fashion, everybody is crunching data on a regular basis. So those data roles are so key.
Yeah, I am. So I've been a carer for the last 5 years, and I've been using a Facebook website where all the different carers are kind of going, oh, my loved one does this, and my loved one, and I think, oh wow, so much data, 6,000 people on this, so much data that I could go and analyze and offer to, you know, some university who's doing research into the particular illness. But we're at a real turning point in terms of that, because now health tech is really growing, and you know there's just so much to get excited and passionate about. And judging your passion then.
Yeah, I think the health tech, I was talking to somebody about that the other day. We've had fintech, we've got health tech now, and I think that is a real, and that for me is big social impact. I mean, you know, I think people that have worked in tech that have then had impact on, you know, sort of medical progression, you know, you'll sleep well at night, won't you, when you know that you're really helping.
Yeah, no, I sat, this is years back. I was on the board at WISE, which is a Women in Science and Engineering thing. And they had a dinner, and one of the prize winners for that evening's event had created some software, which, you know, now we'd say this was AI, but actually it was just an algorithm. And she said, oh yeah, but what it can do, it can find out whether you've got cancer, because it's like looked at all the data about you, and therefore, you know, it can spot the people who are going to have. Wow, wow. You know, we're moving, and that's been out maybe 5, 6 years. We're moving so much faster now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we spoke there a lot about resources and research and how to know what's right for you. Gillian, is there anywhere that you would recommend people, or any networks or communities? And it links quite nicely to a question in the chat box actually around, is networking important? You know, how can people get this information? Is there anything or any websites that you would recommend for them to be a part of?
So yes, but it depends where you are and what you've got access to.
Okay.
So I would, you know, if you're in Leeds, make sure you always go to the Leeds Digital Festival. If you're in Manchester, always get in touch with Manchester Digital. They all have good networks. BCS, British Computer Society, Chartered Institute for IT, they've got networks all over the country, plus in London, and you can physically get with people or you can do it online. And the thing about that is you often get jobs through people, you know. So
Definitely.
and in fact they did used to say that you would always get a job from someone you knew.
And there's something in the chat, isn't there, Izzy, about, is networking important, Gillian? So I think you just answered that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have to you have to be really brave when you're networking, and you have to go and sit next to somebody, and you have to do that. It's cold tonight, isn't it? Oh, and why are you here? And you have to be the first one to speak. It's like one of those dating websites. You have to be the first one to flirt. There's no point in sitting there and waiting for them to do it. You have to be the one to say, oh, and where do you work? And why are you interested in cyber or prop tech or health tech or whatever it is? Because it's you that wants something, and you have to be a bit tough it out. We've all got that strength in us. And it's believing that you have the right. They like talking about themselves anyway.
I can see that there's quite a lot in the chat, Izzy, about because we've talked, you know, it's obviously International Women's Day, and we're talking about championing that, but you know, we opened this up to every gender. It wasn't just for women. But I can see as well that there's, and I don't know whether Gillian's got a sort of sentence or so on this, but actually more about ageism. So
Yeah.
I want to get into the sector, and you mentioned you built your own company at 50. I'm in my 50s now, and I'm still thinking about what my next career would be. I'm not planning on stopping. So getting into tech in your mid-career point, any advice, concerns?
Um, I wouldn't be concerned. I'd push for it. They know that you're coming with a load of transferable skills when you do that. Certainly, I was working with, I think it was KPMG, and they had a returners entry point in their recruitment, and they know you're coming with loads of skills. They just know you do. And there's a nice story. One of my team of architects, a chap called Parves must have been 66, maybe 67, and IBM gave him a promotion and gave him the next level. So, this is once you are in, then they recognize the skills. And, we're short of skills in the industry. We can't be throwing people away just because they got to 55.
And having qualifications and certification in technical to show your technical competency along with your transferable skills. I'm assuming that you were championing that as a hiring manager. You would want someone to have some tech qualifications as well.
You do. I mean, how else will you know? How else
Yeah.
will you know? So, yeah. After they've done kind of 30 years, then you could assume that they know what they're doing. However, yeah, up front at the beginning, that's
Mhm.
how you understand how well people can do. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few comments in the chat and also in general around the qualities and skills that you need. And I know we've spoken a lot about transferable skills and qualifications and certifications, but what do you think you need to be like as a person to do this at any age? Like what qualities would you look for in a team, Gillian, say the one that you were building?
Well, it doesn't matter really. It
Okay.
well, I mean, so it doesn't, is it? If you've got a team and you need some programmers, then it doesn't matter because they're the zoning in people,
Yeah.
and then maybe the team needs somebody who's going to project manager the
Mhm.
whole affair. So then they're not the zoning in people, they're the holistic, let me get my arms round it people. So
Yeah.
so I often think we think there's only one kind of model for how you should be in tech, and that's so not true. There's
Yeah.
so many different
I
people.
think there's one question specifically about data analytics actually, and sort of with anybody without any prior experience, how should you highlight and stand out? And we've had other speakers, and we talk about this in webinars that we've done before around something like data and analytics. You've got to have a curious mind. You've got to be good at problem solving. You might like a really good puzzle because data is usually about making spaghetti into straight lines. So again, Gillian, I know this is probably more your world, but thinking about things like problem solving, creative thinking, tenacity as well. I think if you're going in data, you've got to want to sit and look sometimes at information for quite a long time. The ability to tell a story. Storytelling is really clear, I think, if you want to go into the data world, because you're always going to be presenting to people that are not techies, but actually,
I
what does the
think
data tell you?
that's not just data, that
Yeah,
storytelling
yeah,
skill
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah,
across the board, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
So the business analyst needs to be the listener, but then the storyteller. And
absolutely.
the project manager needs to be the person who could project how it's going to be and the kind of cajoler and coercer. Well, that sounds terrible, but you know what I
And it
mean.
would be
And so there's just so many different skills that you can bring to this that you'd think, oh well, I'm not a techie, but actually you probably are.
Yeah, yeah. And there's an exact question like that in the Q&A box now. I work as an EA currently. You'll think I'll have enough transferable skills to work in tech and change careers. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
definitely.
100%.
definitely.
So, so, um, so at IBM, when I was working in education, there was the secretary. She was called Deirdre, and Deirdre. Every time we'd been out to teach, and we'd come back, and we'd seen all the customers during the day, and Deirdre'd sit there typing, And Deirdre's going, I can do that. And we go, yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. And we'd ignore it anyway. So I sat in the smoking room one day and I was going, yeah, you could do it, Deirdre. Yeah. And you could teach them the thing that you're typing on, which was the early precursor to email. And you could teach them about that thing because you use it all day. And she went, oh, I could, couldn't I? I said, yeah, and we've got a one-day course. So she and I went to see the manager and said,
Hmm.
if Deirdre learned, like, to teach an hour of this thing between Christmas and Easter or whatever, would you give her a chance? And they said, yeah, okay, we'll give her a chance. So she did that. And 2 years later, she was writing IBM manuals and red books, and she was presenting it all. And then she became an IBM marketeer, and she probably still is. So,
Wow.
it's just anyone can do this stuff.
It's the opportunity and the confidence, isn't it? And someone saying to you, you can do this,
Yeah,
which you just have.
yeah,
So hopefully that person feels like they can
yeah.
in the Q&A box. And in terms of kind of wrapping up this session, I'm very conscious of time and getting through questions, but someone has asked Gillian, what is the title of your book that you mentioned
Oh,
at the start?
ooh, ooh.
She's off.
Getting a special view.
There you go. That's the first one I ever wrote. That's
Oh,
my mum read that. It was called
Oh,
APSM for MVS using tapes and tablets.
oh.
My mum said, I didn't understand a word, love.
oh,
Brilliant.
And this is the more recent one.
wow.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we can put that, perhaps
Yeah,
Sophie, we
Billy.
can put that in the chat.
Well, that is for IT directors to kind of say to them, here you go, you need some women and you're short of people, so women are going to be really good for you. So that's why we wrote that.
Do you know,
Mhm.
Izzy, there was one in the chat, which I know will be dear to your heart, not actually in the Q&A, but in the chat as well, that we've got someone that's a year 11 student,
Oh
Gillian,
yeah.
so at the other end of their career, and what should they, it says, but don't know where to start. They want to go into tech. They don't know where to start. What should they do as their first step? Any advice?
Uh, so A levels, O levels, or look at apprenticeships, A levels, GCSEs, or look at apprenticeships. I mean, some of the apprenticeships, you get your hands dirty straight away. That'd be so cool. And, being trusted to do this stuff, and you can't break it,
Mhm.
they won't
Yeah.
let you.
What do you think, Gillian, about the thing that, again, I mean, I've got school age, well, coming out of school age kids now, and this obsession with that to be good in IT, you need to be great at maths. I mean, is that true? Should we all
No.
be focused on getting our maths GC and maths A level?
No.
We want to go in tech. What's your
No, so
thoughts?
there are some courses where you do need to be good at maths. And so my mate Hannah, who teaches over at Aberystwyth University, she floors me with the maths that she does. But then that's only one set of courses. There are other courses where you don't need that stuff. And for a data analyst, you don't necessarily need that stuff. It's a different set of skills. I got a C for my maths. And I was rubbish. And I still struggle with percentages, which you'd think would be really, really easy. But I do
Mm.
struggle with them. And yet, I've had a career where I've worked on hardware, I've worked on software, I've done deep tech problem solving with programs, I've done some programming, I've run computers for banks overnight by myself, being trusted to modify the programs and fix things. Do you know, we can do this without maths, and we can do it with a 2-2 degree, or we can do it without any degree at all because they all used to. And it's just, I don't know, maybe it's because we all think that we're good if we've got a degree, and therefore, we're trying to keep a status quo. I don't know, but
I
it's
guess the development in AI now as well. I mean, people are also thinking, I think there's something in the chat as well around, I know, Izzy, we need to close off, but, is AI going to take over people's
Yeah.
jobs? No, but people need to be able to work alongside AI. AI is not the solution to everything, but it will increase efficiency and effectiveness of operations, and we absolutely need to be working alongside. But we have a sort of saying at Learning People that it's a bit like being a co-pilot. AI is your co-pilot. You're always going to need the human factor to perhaps have that final checking, the final sign off, the people skills that you were talking about there. So I know there's a couple of things in chat. Also, just before you close off, Izzy, just from a Learning People point of view from our students, I know I can see some quotes around, oh, I've got my qualification, I'm trying for a job. Keep contacting our career services teams if you haven't already and you've passed your first exam, and just the importance of both what Izzy and Gillian have said as well around the tenacity. You've got to keep trying. You might apply for a lot of jobs. You know that everybody knows the market is slightly challenging at the moment. That's a sort of worldwide economic challenge, but you know, great people stand out. And what we do know is that there are jobs out there. You've got to keep persevering and apply for a lot. Use your networking. Think about doing cover letters. You know, turn up at those exhibitions. You know, our students get membership with BCS. Go to their events. Start talking to people. Make yourself memorable. Again, Izzy and Gillian, you know, you've mentioned that. I don't know if you'd support that or any other bits of advice.
Yeah, there's a BCS women group. So if you are a woman and you're kind of feeling a bit alienated in a male environment, then go to some of the BCS women events as well.
Yeah, and I would say grow your network on LinkedIn and follow people and role models and use that as much as possible. It's an amazing platform and there's so much advice on there and probably people that might be in similar positions to you and opportunities. So I would say it's a great platform to be a part of as well if you're not already. Yeah. Cool. Well, I've seen that your link to the book is now in the chat box, Gillian. So that's great. So people can access that.
I don't get any royalties, by the way. When we wrote it,
no.
we handed all the royalties over to a prize because we thought it was really important that there should be a prize for women in tech. So I don't ever mind talking about it because, you know, it's not going to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your insights and your honesty and transparency as well around the sector. You know, it's not always been easy, but you're here and you're promoting it and you want to inspire more women into the industry, which I think is the key takeaway from this. So a real celebration of women into tech. And as Rachel mentioned, if you are a Learning People student, then reach out to the career services team. And if you're thinking about it, reach out to the careers consultations team. Careers consultant, sorry. And then if you're under 18 and you're interested, then please feel free to connect with me and I can loop you in with organizations and talk to you about opportunities in tech and where you can get started. So yeah, a really, really great session. Thank you so much, Gillian and Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us.
Have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you, Gillian.